Coming up on That's a Great Point. Amazing how people seeking inner peace will then try to fight themselves.
Yeah, we can hate ourselves through it or we can love ourselves through it. And we so often pick hate. Why? Why do we do that?
Yeah.
Because it's easier.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what we're used to. It's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot harder to love through things than it is to be angry.
Mm-hmm. Well, because to love is to also understand.
I love that point. That's a great point.
Well, I
That's a
think
great point.
I think with when you love through something hard, then you know pain is going to accompany it.
But it's pain with purpose.
Wait, what are we talking about again? Do we shift subjects? Hey there. On today's episode, we're taking a deep dive into psychology. Specifically, we're talking about the inner critic, that voice in our head that remembers all the ways we fell short while conveniently forgetting our positive attributes. How do we manage this voice in our head so we can quit self-destructing? Conventional wisdom would have us ignore it or silence it, fight it or overcome it, and we pose a slightly different view for you to consider. We ask the question, if you're at war with yourself, how are you going to find inner peace? Join us with special guest Tanya Smart to take another step towards getting out of your own way. If you find our content helpful, please comment, like, or subscribe because it helps other people find us more easily. Thanks for playing along. Enjoy. Welcome to That's a Great Point, the attitude adjustment for your soul, where co-hosts Alina Doran, Michelle Albers, and Lee Smart discuss deep topics around a life well lived. Let's start the show. We'll get it happening in both places. We've got
What?
backups.
We're doing it in both places.
Ooh, the innuendo is strong.
So exciting.
All right. So you asked what the list was that I put in the corner up there. That is the list of the 7 different inner critics
Mhm.
that so the inner critic, that voice inside of us that tells us all kinds of things that we may or may not want to hear, tries to hold us back, tries to keep us safe, tears us down, weaponizes data against us. Like it remembers all the bad things, but somehow it managed to forget all the good things that we've done in our lifetime. But I'll be damned, it's like a Rolodex. It'll tell you every single way you've ever screwed up. Many times it has the voice of those people that growing up were playing safe, playing out of fear-based motivation, and we're trying to keep us safe. So they criticized us, and then now that voice is a piece of us, and it's like, you're not enough, you're not doing enough, you're not good enough, you're wrong, you're bad. The inner critic. And go.
Yeah, I never had one. Don't know what you're talking about. When you talk about the inner critic, I think about, there are lots of names for it, lots of frameworks. In coaching school, we learned a lot about the saboteur. We do a lot of saboteur work as part of the training that we did. And I know we do that with clients actively. Positive psychology has, a different name for the types of saboteurs. So yeah, they're there a lot, and we have a bias naturally as human beings very often to focus on the negative, and that comes from our primal, long-standing need to be safe, to not get ourselves in danger. And so there are a lot of mechanisms that are built in naturally into our wiring that keep us from doing something different that we haven't done before, including those voices that will say, all the unhelpful things, although they're there to be helpful, right? So that's, I guess, first thing I'll say is yes, it's, negative bias, our natural tendency, and the other is they're there to keep us from hurting ourselves, right? And getting rid of all of them would not be helpful to us.
Yeah. Well, like many of the things that we talk about, there's a healthy version of it, and then there's an over-indexed, has gone way too far version of it.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about the number one we have in our list up here in the chat, the perfectionist. That's I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to be judged, rejected. And so I'm going to make sure that whatever you do, it has to be perfect. Because if you put something perfect out in the world, you can't be judged, you can't be rejected.
Or, if you don't mind, you do want to be judged, but you want to be judged positively.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You don't want to be judged negatively. You want to be seen as this great person. You want to be put on a pedestal, or at least a part of you does. And if you're not perfect,
There's a few other names for this. Michelle and I are talking at the same time.
I don't believe we can escape judgment. Even the perfect get judged. Then, because the people who get jealous of the perfection that is, I mean, you can't escape the judgment. It's there. Whether we like it.
That's the thing about the perfectionist. One of the other alternatives is to never get yourself out there, never take that risk, because that way you will not get criticized. So that great idea just won't make it out there, because we can always use the guise of, well, it's not ready, right? So when I think about the perfectionist, I think when I'm ready, I will, write that book. When I'm ready, I will do that talk. When I'm ready, I will ask for that promotion. Everything will happen when I'm ready. But maybe one will choose to not quite ever be ready, because then they can't fail. And then they can't be critiqued. And they can't be like, meh. So let's just not do it at all.
I asked a client one time, said, what does perfection look like? If you were to make your product absolutely perfect, what would it look like? And he sat and thought about it for a little while. He said, oh, shit. It would be different for every person. Therefore, I cannot make it perfect before I release it into the world. I have to adjust it per each person that I sell it to. So all of a sudden he's like, I get to sell this thing, and it doesn't have to be ready beforehand. I could sell it and then make it right, because I'm going to make it right based off of their feedback.
That's right. That's your version one, right? Absolutely. In product development, like that, there's an understanding that you will be iterating. You cannot know everything at the very start. You have to learn it with real people who actually use your product.
As I hear that, I think of the one size fits all, like the seeking of one size fits all. But like that actual truth is one size fits me, because that's your only lived experience. It takes the outsider out of the equation without even realizing it. Because how can you possibly know what they need if you've never engaged with them? So then you just go off of your own experiences. So it's not one size fits all. It's one size fits me. It's a totally different mindset.
I like that a lot.
The perfectionist is it's fun. There's other ways to call the inner critic too. It's other names for the inner critic. That's what I'm trying to say. We'll get there eventually. The inner bully, the judger, like the judgmental one is. I know for me, my inner critic actually starts to turn and criticize others first. I'm criticizing everything else in the world. It's everything else's fault. Wow, how come they can't make that right? Why are they so stupid? What's wrong with these people? And then the further I get, like if I'm really, really on a downward spiral, it's not until after that part's over with, then I start to sink lower into self-criticism. It's like, God, I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. What the hell? Why did I do all these stupid things? I know better than that. That's a key phrase in my head. I know better than that. That's how I know the inner critic's here. So I'm curious if y'all have some common phrases that you think of whenever you know your inner critic is having a seat at the table, maybe a little bit too much influence.
I'm sure I do, but I can't think of specifics in the now. It's more of like I start noticing my thought patterns and they're, my energy's out of whack. My thought patterns are not helpful in any way. And then it's just like, oh, I'm noticing that. Here we go. Now what? Now what's the next decision? I think it's interesting talking about these labels of the things that really are the obstacles that keep us either where we're at or take us to a different place that's not really for our best and highest good. And I used to use these as a crutch, as like well, this is my truth. This is how it is, in a negative, like self-beating up kind of way. And now I can like see them, recognize them, label them, and understand that it's helpful to notice these things, but that it doesn't lead me to guilt and shame and hating on myself. My pattern used to be hating on myself. Like that was a great habit. It was wonderful. It made such a fun life. Not to say I never beat up on myself anymore, but I don't have that same relationship with like these phrases used to give me like angst. And now I find them useful tools, which is an interesting, like I've never really thought about that until this moment. It's interesting to like be a witness to that, of my relationship to these words even.
What else?
There's a lot there. Tanya was going to say something.
Well, I can definitely relate to what Michelle was saying, in that I don't know that it's a certain catchphrase that goes through my head that I know the inner critic has been coming out, but it's more, for me, I think it's more physical. When my inner critic is especially active, I'm going to have a lot more anxiety, and with the anxiety, I'm going to lean in towards maybe some unhealthy coping mechanisms. The desire to maybe eat food that I know is going to make me feel awful, or I'm not much of a drinker, but if I have a desire to drink alcohol, then I know like it's there. There's been a few times where, I wasn't a smoker for very long, and I haven't smoked in almost 20 years. Maybe not quite that much, but like if it's really bad, I'll get to that point where I'm like, I want a cigarette. And I don't actually want a cigarette, but for me it's that, and that those symptoms come around usually with the inner critic.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's when I'm beating myself up over something, and then the other stuff starts to manifest from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a key phrase there. When I'm beating myself up over something, that's how you know the inner critic is well and present.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. The responses are so different for so many people, but they're all roads lead to Rome, right? For me, I feel a physical contraction in my body. When I feel my imposter coming on, like, you're not good enough, right? Like that voice, I would feel the contraction in my throat or in my sternum close up. And I know that it's here, right? And I know that it's here. And I'd love to talk about, maybe we could do that later. What what action can we take? What can we do when we feel it, when we're aware of its presence, rather when we're aware that it's stepped over the line and it's taking up too much space.
How y'all
Maybe
feel
it's
about
always
going down the list here and just kind of talking about some of the other 6 ways to know inner critics here? Then we can start to talk about actions.
Let's do it.
Cool.
Let's do it.
So we already talked about the perfectionist. Number 2 is the controller, the inner controller. The inner controller, how you know that's here is whenever you start to have desires and start to beat yourself up over having those desires. The inner controller is going to want to prevent pleasurable activities out of fear that if you have that one drink or that one ding dong, or if you have sex that one time, then you're going to fall off and you're going to have no willpower, and then it's all over with. You're going to end up at the bottom of the spiral immediately. So it will actually prevent you from having pleasure in your life. You have to control. So it tries to control the impulsive acts because it might not be good for you. I'm reminded right now of some religions like, oh, that's the devil. So the fear behind the inner controller is you'll get out of control if you allow yourself to slip even just a little bit. And the phrases behind that is you have no willpower. You don't have what it takes to resist that, and you're going to fall off immediately if you have that one drink or that piece of pie, the piece of cake, whatever it is.
When you first started talking about controller, where I went with that was, I think it's codependency. When I start thinking I'm needy, like I'm too needy, I want too much. I either want my friends to take it away from me or my partner to take it away from me, or I want food to take it away from me, right? So it's like if I start thinking I'm needy, like I'm too much, I'm needy, that's my inner controller.
Hmm. This is actually what sparked this idea in my head of talking about the inner critic, because this came up, it's been coming up on a regular basis with one client in particular, and it came up strong last week. And that he had a wonderful few days, but it required a lot of him, and he was exhausted. And when he became exhausted, he had a few pieces of candy. And then all of a sudden, he started beating himself up. You're going to fall apart. It's all over with from here. And just continued to beat himself and beat himself. By the time within a few days of having that candy to our meeting, he was already in such tremendous fear of you're backsliding, you're falling down the mountain. Now you're going to have to climb back up this mountain again. You've made all this progress over the years, and your willpower, your discipline has made it this far. And now this one instance, it's all falling apart, and you got to start all over because you don't have any willpower. You're weak. That's the thought processes, and in that conversation is like, shit, that's what we need to talk about on the podcast. That inner critic, because of how damaging that critic can be.
Well, maybe what I said isn't quite exactly the inner controller, but as I'm looking at the list, I don't really see it fitting anywhere else. So I think it can be. It's just a different kind of, yeah.
When I hear about it and I'm looking at the list, I was thinking of the destroyer, and it's this all or nothing approach. The idea that, you've been making all this great progress, right? You're working towards a goal and you're making great strides. Well, you had a setback. Setbacks are included, right? It's okay. We all have setbacks. We continue on our journey and we will stumble along the journey. Good for you for getting back up. Good for you for continuing to make progress. It sounds like what this particular person did was stop there and focus on the stumble, and very unforgiving, and taking this all or nothing approach of like, no, I have to perfectly follow the plan. I have to perfectly behave myself and not break any of those, promises I made to myself. And when they inevitably do, because they're human, and at some point that will stumble, it's throwing out, the baby with the bathwater.
Hmm.
It's this all or nothing approach. So that I think of the destroyer. Let's just take down the whole thing. Forget everything else
Yeah.
everything that I've accomplished so far.
So I'd be
Yeah.
curious how the inner controller shows up for all of you. Like from what Lee just said about the inner controller, to circle it back
Well,
to
I
that.
think when it comes to the inner critic, we'll typically have one or two that we really, really resonate with, that we're more likely to lean into based
Mhm.
on us, right? So there might be a couple of them on here that you don't resonate with whatsoever,
Mm.
but somebody else will. So we don't all have all of them. It's
Oh,
typically
I
like
bet they all
wherever.
show up at some point in our life.
Yeah,
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 I
yeah. That's
I
it.
think so. I think so. Like even if some of these don't resonate with me at the moment, or maybe even haven't in years, I definitely have a little bit of all seven, I think. But some of them show up more strongly. Like for me, the inner controller, uh, to I guess put a little bit of vulnerability out there. Lee and I had a discussion, a discussion like I kind of broke down with him not too long ago where um I had been in a really good place with, working out, and I felt really good physically. And over the summer, I got a shoulder injury, and that really made a lot of my progress with some of the work I was doing fall back. Like I physically I didn't feel as good. I didn't look as good. And one of the things I had said to him was, you know, like, I'm so disappointed in myself. Like, I've let myself get this far. Um, I took myself to a level that I wanted to be at. And then this injury kind of pushed me back, or at least went towards pushing me back. And he just looked at me and he was like, when have you ever given up? Like, when have you ever let that get the best of you? I've never known you to not work hard and get back to where you wanted to be, just in general. But that was definitely an example of my inner controller coming out. Like, I've let myself fall. I will never get back to where I was. And it took saying it out loud. I had been saying it to myself for a while, but it took saying it out loud and kind of having that reassurance before I started to, I don't know, fight back against it.
Such a key piece of the inner critic is that it remembers all the bad and forgets all the good.
Absolutely. That is our natural wiring. Our natural wiring is to keep focusing on the negative. That is why, gratitude, journaling, constant like habits and routines that keep us refocusing on the positive over and over and over. It needs so much repetition because it goes against our default setting of constantly looking at the negative. That is our default setting. And that is why we do the work to keep correcting ourselves towards the positive, right? Not to say we don't look at the negative,
Yeah.
but to give ourselves credit to see the whole thing. Yes, there's this and there's that. It isn't black and white. I guess the way that I can relate to, I think I'm thinking of this as an all or nothing, right? Like throw out the good, focus on the bad. And
Hmm.
the way that I could relate to it immediately, very personally, is that I've made great strides in, my getting my health in better shape and eating better and working out more consistently. And I'd say the last 2 months, some things have happened. It started with a trip where I went on a trip. I was on vacation. I was enjoying certain foods that I don't usually enjoy. One thing begat the next thing begat the next thing, and it went off rails. And so I found myself doing that self-flagellation, beating yourself up.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, that's not working out. How long is this beating up going to be good for? Right. And doing things in response to that beating up is not a great feeling either. Doing it out of kindness to myself is a better way to do it than you piece of, you piece of shit. You ate all that bread. Well, now you get to the gym. Now you get to the gym because that's what you deserve. Like that's not great self-talk. It's not a good feeling, right?
No.
Because loving myself now as I am today and doing kind, good things for myself is the way that I want to move in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I've spent a long time in the self-flagellation state.
Yeah,
And
we're
see, I
taught
feel
that.
like I'm generally like that too. Like the inner controller isn't used to be, but hasn't been an issue for me for a long time. But like in that moment, it was huge for me. And it took a reminder for me to kind of get back to that no, that, I do love myself. I may not be happy with where I am, but I'm going to get back to that better place because, I've never given up on anything. And it did take my partner like pointing it out to me and kind of giving me a reality slap to the inner critic.
We're taught to punish ourselves. We're taught to punishment is the way to create change. And I realized very early on in raising our children that when I've punished them, very little change happened. And I would all except for me feeling bad about punishing them. That would happen. I felt terrible about punishing them, and yet there was no behavior change. Whenever we moved from negative reinforcement to positive reinforcement, all of a sudden our children started to behave like we get compliments on a regular basis about how freaking great our children are. Like, wow. We have people come into our house, and I never wanted kids because everybody else's kids are terrible and they're little shits. But I mean, y'all's kids, I have hope. Um, so that, yeah, that punishment it's I don't we're taught that punishment is a way to create change, but really and truly, it's just a way to get. I don't know. I think about how often I lashed out from being punished, and like, oh, you're gonna make me feel terrible. You're gonna punish me. Watch this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll show you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Punishing gets results, just not the desired results. Definitely
Yeah,
gets results. It gets
exactly.
fear, right? It gets the communication breakdown,
Uh-huh.
loss of trust.
Uh-huh.
When you're operating in fear and right rebellion, now you're in reactive mode. It also shows the person who's being punished, including when we punish ourselves, that we expect less of whether it's that child that's being disciplined or if it's ourselves that we're punishing, that we don't expect much. We just expect to do this one thing and that's it. Just do it. And you didn't do it. And now you are gonna do it, right? As opposed to seeing this person, what they're capable of and what they're right, what's disappointing, what's possible, creating a much bigger world.
Piece of what you were talking about, Tanya, too, that reminds me a bit of the taskmaster, where we look at the number 3 on the list. The taskmaster is if you're not productive, if you're not moving forward and being productive, then you're less than, then you're not worthy, then you're not enough. This one was huge for me. It's like the voices that might pop in your head if the taskmaster is it controls. You're just so lazy. You know, you're not going to get anywhere in life if you're not successful, if you're not achieving, if you're not getting the degrees and the certifications and the job titles and if you're not constantly productive, you're less than. You're a piece of shit. And I know for me that was like I'm not getting it done. I'm not making enough money in the business. I'm a lazy piece of shit. I just need to work harder. It's like that overachiever that all of the self-worth is based on achievements.
If you're not doing something, then what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Number three, the demise of every business owner out there.
Say it again louder.
Number three, the demise of every business owner out there. I have never met one that doesn't go there, ever.
Yep.
This one speaks to me quite a bit.
Mhm.
I just about every client I have worked with, all of my clients who have now, most of them have gotten past that. That is specifically like an audit that we do of their day, busy versus productive. Every single thing that we're doing, every single thing, right? Every task, every to do, is it moving the needle? Is this really helpful? Is this getting you what you really want? Or are you getting to feel good about yourself when you check off a box? Like, yes, it is done. Get to cross out an item. My item had 25, my list has 25 items on it, and I've crossed out 15 of them. It was a pretty good day. What was it? What did you actually get done? Was it a deflection, or were there things that you truly needed to do?
Or it's you have a list of 20, you accomplish 19, and then beat yourself up over the one.
And there's that. And there's that. And how uncomfortable quite a few of the folks that I work with, where we work on having their list be no more than 5, because that feels very, very naked, very sparse, too spacious, uncomfortably spacious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, your list is going to be very short for today. What does that feel like? What does it feel like if you get to do only 2 things today and love them? What if they're the most important things that will get you 80% of what you need, but they're only 2 things, and all those other things are just energy leaks?
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that that's space, and culturally, space is vulnerable. Like, we're not comfortable in space, we're comfortable in action. And I know that's not a collective, not everyone, but many, most. What happens when you have space, like literally nothing in a moment of time? What do you do with that? Where do you go?
Thinking about 2 things right now. One is that, I have hobbies, I work out, I make sure that I make my recovery super efficient so that I can be more productive. So all the hobbies and the recovery and the sleep and all that is optimized just so I can be even more productive instead of, no, I actually want to go do this hobby and just do it for the fun of it. It's like, no, I'm not going to do it because then whenever I stop, finally I'll be more productive. Right. So there's that. And then there's the other thing too, in that being productive is a way to keep our brain from sitting with uncomfortable thoughts, uncomfortable emotions. It's a very much so a coping mechanism, staying busy so that I don't have to deal. The old workaholism.
I think you mean feel.
Well, sure. It's a great deflector, right? You get to end your day with a completed task list. And then what you don't get to do is to be with how you're feeling, with how you're thinking, to actually get in touch with what's in your body, because then that gives you more information, more data about what's really happening in your life. That means that you might need to get a little more honest with yourself. And that sometimes is really not fun in the short term. Yeah.
So moving on, Underminer. Let me pull up. This one wasn't one that I was very familiar with, because it's the opposite of me. I think you'll like this one, Tanya. The Underminer is very uncomfortable with risk. They try to undermine your self-esteem and want you to stay small so you avoid failing, judged, or rejected. So it's don't even bother trying, you'll fail anyway, or What's the point? Why does it matter?
I find it hilarious that just as I knew the Taskmaster was your kryptonite, you knew that the Underminer and one more are my biggest ones. But we haven't gotten to the second one yet. Yeah, I'm super guilty of letting the Underminer take control of well, if you're not going to succeed, then you're not ready to try it yet. You're going to fail at it. Or the risk is too great.
I had a really cool experience in one of our weekend retreats where Kat, my psychologist friend, literally called me out or labeled something for me that I had never heard. I just never thought of it in this way before. And I was talking about just growing up, never feeling like I could do anything right and always kind of feeling like my way was never the correct way. And that's just how I took like everything in life. And she's like, learned helplessness. And I'm like, what? And she's like, you don't try anything because you can never do it right. You believe you can never do it right. So why bother trying? It's learned helplessness. She's like, you don't show up that way anymore. And I was like, well, yeah, but that took a lot of doing. And I didn't know it had a label. And that was super helpful because now if I do have a pinge where something's really new and uncomfortable for me and I have that voice in my head that says, don't try it, you'll fuck it up and do it wrong anyway, don't even bother. I can label it as like, oh, this is like learned helplessness. It's a pattern from an old way I used to show up and it's not true anymore. And so even just that one little phrase has like changed my life on a level. I told her that just yesterday. I saw her and I go, when you told me I had like learned helplessness, that was the most useful thing you could have ever said to me because for some reason it locked in and clicked and gave me a new way to see that pattern instead of having that pattern come in and have me beat myself up because I'm living in fear, which is true, but it's not the whole story. It was amazing. So I don't know if that helps anyone, but that was so helpful for me.
It's an incredibly helpful term. It's funny, I just learned this term or it got my attention and I really focused on it in the last month. So right around the same time, the underminer, the one that keeps oneself small that's the turtle asshole archetype of one of my archetypes, right? Of like, stay in the shell, stay where it's safe, stay back. Don't go out there. Might be dangerous. Change nothing. Keep small. Maybe nobody will notice. It's like standing in gym class and you're waiting to get picked for like a game that you're not really great at. And you're hoping, you just kind of stand there and freeze and you hope they don't pick you. So you don't have to
stand
suck
behind somebody.
What's that?
You just kind of stand behind somebody.
Or you sort of stand there kind of frozen and you kind of hope that they don't see you. Or if you look down at the ground and you freeze, you don't take up much space, maybe they'll just keep going, right? Or not getting called on in a classroom because you might not know the answer. So you sort of look down, pretend to look busy. Maybe they won't call on me.
Certainly don't make eye contact.
You do not look eye contact. That's how you get noticed. Do not.
I think that's so funny too, because with the Underminer, like the thought of that, the Underminer is definitely one of mine, but the thought of getting called on in a classroom or getting picked for a sport, like I'd be up in the front, like, yeah, let's go, pick me. I know the answer. I'll kick that ball. Like, get me. But for other risk-taking situations, I'm definitely oh God, no, I can't do it. I'm gonna fail. Like not only am I gonna fail, but if I take this risk, we're gonna be financially insecure. Like when we decided to start our first business, that was gut-wrenching. Like I wanted to throw up for a long time. That was very hard for me. It's those types so I guess my point is I think it's funny how you can have that particular inner critic, but it's not all encompassing, right? it's not necessarily you're always feeling that, but if you put me in this corner, that's the one that's going to take over.
Context dependent. It's like, where is the risk in your own brain? What do you find to be risky? Because for you, standing up and
Right.
giving an answer in class isn't a risky thing because you know the answer.
Yeah.
And you don't care.
I cannot know the answer, and I'm just not afraid. I'm not afraid to be wrong, but I am deathly afraid of, losing something that I actually find important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all perspective.
Like security.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And I just that's the thing I think is funniest about the and I didn't really put it together until Alina started giving her very good examples of, man, you can have this critic, but it's not necessarily going to affect you in all walks of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm realizing as I'm thinking about all of the critics and all of the different names that we're going through today of the types. The one that can hug them all is the catastrophizer. That's the one that I'm thinking in my head. The catastrophizer is like all of them will be held in that basket. Right? It's this all or nothing. Like it needs to be perfect. You need to have the tasks done, right? You need to have like the inner controller. It all needs to be there. It's the catastrophizer.
I have a new dance step for the catastrophizer if you want to dance a little.
Yes.
After you catastrophize all the way out to as bad as it can get, work your way back to all the way over how good it could possibly get. Which
Love
might
that.
not feel possible if you're always going only the one way, but like be the other side of the pendulum. Go all the way the other way too.
I love that, right? There's a great question. Like, what if this actually works out? Like we've walked through a number of scenarios where it can all just go to shit, catastrophize it. What if this actually works?
Yeah, you can what if your way down to doomsday, or you can what if your way to celebration and like success, like, which is a loaded word in and of itself, but like that's the one that came in. Like how doomsday, what if all the way to the worst case, and then what if all the way to the best case?
Like, so we all die. I am super fulfilled and happy.
Yeah. Well, this is talk about the priming principle. The priming principle is like whenever you buy a green Honda Civic, and all of a sudden you start to notice that green Honda Civic everywhere, all over the place, and you didn't notice it before you actually owned it. So did they all did everybody decide to buy that car on the same day that you did, or is your brain just primed to see? Now all of a sudden we've got all these other vehicles. It's because we prime our brain to see what we want it to see. And if all we've ever trained it to see is the negative, that's all it's going to see. So once you start to train your brain and prime it to see the positive, you'll start to see more positive. This works. You watch. I hate it whenever you get people that are addicted to the news, because the catastrophizer's always there. They watch the news and they train their brain to see the most dramatic, the worst things. And I'm guessing from the look on y'all's face, my computer's taking a shit.
I heard you, but your face wasn't matching what was happening in the sound.
Yeah. God, I have to go buy a new computer this week. It's been getting bad. I'm not sure what's up with it, but it's like I don't know if my RAM's dying or what. But anyway, where did I leave off? Damn it.
Catastrophizing?
I did hear you. You're talking about people who watch the news. And
Yeah. People who watch the news, you could find it. They get addicted to catastrophizing. It's like they've primed their brain to only see the worst, because that's all they show on the news, because that's how they make money. That's how they grab attention, is to grab people's attention with the most dramatic thing possible. So you get somebody watching the news, on a regular basis, they train their brain to only see bad things. And it's so unhealthy for our brain to ingest that. It's a garbage in, garbage out kind of scenario. You put garbage into your computer, which I guarantee this computer doesn't have an STD, but it was possible in the past. But garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. And you get what you put in it. We start to put these positive thoughts in our brain. We start to look at the good. We're going to see more good. So, talking about the good, the exact opposite, number 5 here, the destroyer. The destroyer only sees the bad. The destroyer is, you don't even deserve to live. You're not worth it. You're useless. This is probably one of the worst voices. This is going to be the voice of that person who's deeply depressed. Like the destroyer is going to pull you in the most depressed state possible, and that you're just a worthless pile of human garbage and you don't even deserve to live.
So the destroyer ties into self-worth is what I heard there. Like you if something good starts to happen, you will make sure it does not continue because you don't believe you deserve it. Just simplify.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's in a good relationship, and make sure that we destroy it because we're not worth it. I finally got something good happening. I'm always waiting for that other shoe to drop because this is just not, it's not good. Because the world is a terrible place and I'm a terrible person. I don't deserve this. I mean, it's not a place that I spend a lot of time, so I don't resonate with it as deeply, but I've seen it.
Yeah. When you talk about the destroyer, I'm thinking about it in like a range, right? A scale. So if it's like a 1 to 10, when you get to 8 and up, it's been time to get mental health assistance. It's been time. And I hope that the person that suffers this badly, and when it does get dark and the darkness stays that long, I hope that person has community support and mental health assistance from someone who can really walk with them there. It could be depression, clinical depression, not the way we say day to day, like I'm depressed, no, truly depressed. And then on the other end of the scale, when I think of like 1 to 3, 1 to 4, maybe it goes back to, I didn't feel worthy when, I don't feel worthy of, someone doesn't feel worthy of love. They don't feel worthy of praise. They don't feel deserving. And maybe that shows up as, for relationships going well, something's wrong. Like that waiting for that other shoe to drop. Like something's got to be wrong here. The skeptic. And I think that's, a lot of cultures in the world to this day, certainly, that have it's a hard life, harder compared to, when we think of like a stereotypical American life where we haven't had a war, right? We have this protection, this geographical advantage of having, an ocean on each side and having peaceful neighbors where we've enjoyed years and years and years of peace. Well, there are a number of regions in the world that have not had that advantage, and they have war and unrest, and they're used to being, constantly having to be vigilant. And that culture, even if there is no war happening today, creates this hypervigilance that can look like someone who's malcontent, where it's never good enough because they're always skeptical, because if something looks great, it's got to be like you're being fooled. That's just the first layer. There's a conviction that if you dig a little deeper, you're going to find something. That's where it is. Always looking for that it. Never believing, entering a negotiation with total suspicion. It's trickery, right? Expecting to play mind games, expecting to play a chess game. No. Never wearing your heart on your sleeve. Absolutely not. You lock that thing up as hard as you can, far away.
It's also the business owner that becomes financially successful and then blows all their money on shit that they have no use to buy, or go spend all their cash, and then all of a sudden they don't have enough cash flow to make it another day, and then they go out of business. I've met a few people in my time that have built multiple six-figure income businesses, and then eventually burned them down in some way, shape, or form. Managed to just sabotage it and destroy it all because deep down inside they didn't think they were worthy of making that kind of money. And I remember one guy in particular, he had lost some people that he loved dearly to suicide. And he had that survivor guilt. I'm not worthy to still be here because they're dead, and it should have been me and not them. So he would go and he would achieve greatly and have, $1 million revenue businesses, and then just wipe them out. Go spend all the money, spend all the cash flow, then have nothing, and then do it again. It was just like this ongoing cycle till he realized after a while, it was like, I'm guilty. I don't feel like I'm worthy of having this money because they're gone and I'm still here. This is like the survivor guilt that soldiers go through, that I'm going to destroy myself. I'm going to destroy this life because I shouldn't even be here anymore. It should have been me that died on the battlefield and not them.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Uh-huh.
It's like you're telling the universe it's going to be bad. And the universe says, okay, it's going to be bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
Which
think,
ties, what's that?
well, I was going to say, I think the destroyer is probably what I work with most with my clients, because usually by the time they get to me, that's about where they're at. And they are able to recognize it. And I think the thing that typically will reach them the most is whenever they have somebody telling them, you are worthy and you are loved and you are important. Because I do think the destroyer is one of the more difficult ones to overcome. Like Alina pointed out, kind of if that inner critic is present, then you probably are at the point where you need professional help from someone who's able to offer it, and just giving someone in that position the compassion that they so desperately need at the moment is what's important. And telling them and teaching them that it's okay to have some self-compassion.
That's the hard part too, because almost every time they're not willing or ready to receive that compassion either.
Well, they don't
They'll
know
re-
how.
they'll reject it out of hand.
Well, and I've seen it go a lot of ways. I've seen the ones that, like, all of a sudden you see the tension leave their eyes and they're kind of like in a thank you, I needed to hear that. And then I've also seen the refusal, the no way, the you don't know what you're talking about. The,
So I've already briefly described the next one, the guilt tripper, and that's the one that weaponizes past data against us. It remembers all the things that we've done in the past that weren't good enough, that were failures, so on and so forth. And it makes sure that no matter what situation comes up, you're going to remember that. It's like, yeah, you remember that time? The guilt tripper.
It's an interesting name for it. Yeah, it's being super unforgiving. Again, it's that catastrophizing of, well, that one mistake you made, it's I'm hearing a theme of, right, of all or nothing in some of them as a common thread.
Mm-hmm.
That one mistake, forget all the other 90 things you've done that are wonderful and kind and helpful. Let's go back to that one time you screwed up. Let's stay there for a little while.
Hmm.
It's there are a lot of people looking for jobs right now. And there are a lot of people, and I talked to some of those job seekers, and that saboteur shows up for them in our conversations when they will talk about the one time that they were fired. They'll think of one past experience, could have been 20 years ago, of a screw up that they got fired. Okay, they made mistakes. They recognize they own those mistakes. Great. Rationally, living outside of their brain, you think, well, that would be enough, right? To see what you did, understand what your learnings are, take them forward. No, because that saboteur, right, that guilt tripper is in there, loud. It's preventing them from daring more greatly, applying for more roles. And when they do get interviews and have conversations, they're bringing themselves very differently. Right? It's like, I'm not a dog owner. I see videos of dogs that know that they've done something really wrong and they stepped in it. And they kind of walk into the house with their heads down, small, trying not to be noticed, looking down because they feel so bad they know.
Tail tucked between the legs.
Yep, it's that similar approach to new opportunities. Instead of coming in with, I can do this, let's go. But it's not an open body stance. It's a very, hey, will you take me? I'm pretty good. I can do it.
I think too, what makes the guilt tripper so powerful is it doesn't necessarily have to be coming from a place where I screwed up in the past. I feel like we have so many religions that use, and parents and friends and, well, maybe not friends so much. I'll say family, religion. I feel like there are a lot of places that use guilt, possibly as a way to control, possibly as a way, to conform. But we have this guilt that sometimes is put upon us, that we start to believe, even if it isn't true. The child who maybe isn't taking care of the parent, why aren't you doing this? Society says that you, and I use the term child loosely, like child-parent relationship, not necessarily a literal child. Well, why aren't you taking care of your parent? That's what you're supposed to do. And of course, this can get sticky culturally, because culturally this is going to be different amongst different people. But maybe that parent wasn't really a great parent to you. Maybe they are truly undeserving of your help later on. But you still have people, religion, ideas but they're your parent, therefore you should help them. And the same could be said in other scenarios. But I think religion, society, family, these are all places where that guilt can come from. And even if we know it's not true, we still might have that in the back of our head. But I should be doing this because everybody else says it's the right thing to do.
I think you hinted at something even deeper when you were talking about that, whenever you talked about serving versus pleasing, and that many people think helping that parent is going to be pleasing them, comforting them, making life easier for them, so on and so forth, whenever really to help them is to try to make sure that they can be more independent on their own, right? Because I'm getting, just knowing what I know, it's like, you're expected to be the caretaker, and you're almost expected to be the one soothing and comforting and providing, so on and so forth, for somebody who continually takes advantage. And whenever we try to caretake somebody that's continually taking advantage, they won't even take care of themselves. It's not helping. That's the opposite of helping. When they could take care of themselves and you don't make them do it, then it's actually harming them, because now they're becoming even more helpless over the long term. Make sense?
Enabling.
Exactly. It's enabling.
Empowering.
So it's serving versus pleasing kind of enabling versus I want to make sure that somebody who can take care of themselves perfectly well is going to do so. And that's a harder place to come from. It looks like you're not taking care of them. So other people are like,
Yeah.
well, why aren't you taking care of us? Actually, no, I am. I'm just doing it in a way I find is more helpful instead of trying to enable them. Right.
Right.
So there's a lot more to it, but the whole guilt trip thing, you brought it in huge in that, yes, it is given to us so many times, taught. It's like, I'm going to control you and I'm going to try and make you force somebody to do what I think they need to do using fear and guilt and so on. I mean, you look at freaking Catholicism. You're born with sin, and you're full of sin, and you sin every day, and then it's just like, ooh, there's so much guilt wrapped up in that, and there's so much. Oh God, it ticks me off. It really does, and that it teaches people that they're broken and they're not worthy and they're not enough. And it's fear-based motivation.
I just keep
It,
thinking of the phrase traditions is guilt from dead people. Like
yep.
that's it. Like everything we're talking about in some way, shape, or form is a tradition. And it just breeds guilt. Because what if that tradition doesn't align with you? Now you
Yeah.
have guilt because traditions typically are an entire culture or right? Or at least community. And so I don't know. It's interesting to think about it in that way.
That is interesting, right? Well, traditions and can certainly be beautiful and, honoring ancestors, family members who are no longer with us could be a beautiful thing. It can feel great. It's the question of,
Is
does
it
this feel
aligned?
right to you in your
Yeah.
life? Is this who you want to be?
Yeah, I wasn't implying that all traditions are
Yeah.
bad, but I think it's interesting to think about, do we ever pause to consider why we're doing that?
Mhm.
And if it's aligned and if it makes sense for us, there's
Yeah.
always so much more to the story.
Yeah.
There's layers to the pictures, and it's like if it doesn't
We,
align.
yeah, we talk about this on a regular basis, and that there is some truth to everything that we talk about, but then there's ways to over-index said truths. Like uh, to err is human. To make mistakes is absolutely human, but it doesn't mean that we're freaking broken. It doesn't mean that there's something inherently broken within us, like there's something inherently wrong with us. I read something the other day that I absolutely loved, and that mental health is inherently in us already. We just have to get rid of some of the messaging and some of the things that we're taught to be healthy. I really wish I could explain that even better, but it's like we're already mentally healthy as long as we believe we are.
It's there for us.
Hmm. So you mentioned the conformist or conforming a while ago, Tanya, and that's the last inner critic is the conformist. That's I have to be like everybody else or I will be rejected. I will not fit in, so on and so forth. So,
I think this applies to anybody who lives in a society.
mhm.
Can anyone relate?
Yeah, yeah.
Who could possibly not relate?
Well, well, this is the people pleaser,
Yes.
right? This is what will they think, what's going through their head, so on and so forth. It's adjusting ourselves based on what somebody else may or may not be thinking. People pleasing. I have to take care of others so that I can be okay.
Most certainly. And a lot of, midlife crisis comes from this. The quarter life crisis. There's a book called The Quarter Life Crisis because it is a phenomenon. and the midlife crisis. These crises often come from the realization that we were living in accordance with someone else's expectations, someone else's standards. We did the things that were expected. So why aren't we thrilled and happy? Why aren't things going well when we were doing the things that were expected of us? We thought that we were doing the right, the good, and now what?
I can't say no to my boss. Even though I know I can't take anything else on, I'm still going to say yes because that's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. I'm going to do too many things. I'm going to do them all poorly, but you know what? I can't say no because that's a bad thing.
The conformist also lives in the turtle asshole. Yeah. It's my boundaries don't matter, so please go ahead and step on me.
People pleasing is a big deal, especially if you start to talk about the business example. That's if one customer thinks that I didn't serve them well, the whole business is going to fall apart.
There's the catastrophizing, right? There's the all or nothing. That's the thread. It's not all or nothing. It's that one mistake, one screw up.
It look like y'all are spent.
I think we're ready for our final segment. That's the vibe that I'm getting.
So I'm thinking based on today's conversation, it's going to be really, really difficult to come up with 3 points each on what we want to do when it comes to the inner critic. So I'll just throw this out there. How about we each talk about one thing we can do? And I actually would prefer to go last because I have an exercise that we can do as a group that can help to release some of this. You up for it?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Cool. All right,
Usual
man.
order would work then, right?
Say again?
The usual order would work then. You always bring it home.
Perfect.
All right.
All right, darling.
Guests of honor.
Oh, okay. So I think the biggest thing for me, when dealing with my own inner critic and when helping, uh, my clients with theirs is just the reminder, of grace. Give yourself grace. In the terms of sometimes when we let that inner critic criticize others, give others grace. Just remember grace. A little bit of kindness to yourself or to others can go a really long way. And trying to put that into practice regularly and putting that into practice maybe when we aren't hearing the critic heavily, right? Like giving ourselves grace even when we're not up here, you know. Our inner critic may take us up here, but even when we're kind of down here, remembering just to give ourselves and give others grace. That's mine.
I love that was yours, that you went first and that's the one, because to do any of this work that we're going to be suggesting cannot be started without compassion. So compassion for yourself, kindness to yourself or to others. I love that that's the one that you brought first. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I think my one thing is once you have the compassion and give yourself a little bit of that grace, like you're allowed to make mistakes. You're actually supposed to. That's called living. Is take yourself to that, sit with what just appeared in your head, right? All of the saboteurs, all 7 of these self-critics that we talked about, they all have this thread of catastrophizing, where we take a thought that's negative and it's blown into this tremendous, bigger than life size, and it feels like it's the end of the world. And so we have this outsized thought. And so when we take that thought and we recognize it, ask yourself the question, is it true? Is this true? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Is that really true? And that can help start shifting into reality and the idea of being with both. Like, I can be scared of taking a risk. That's what that voice is saying to me. And I can go ahead and take that risk. It could be scary to assert a boundary. Yeah, that's what I'm feeling. And I think I'm still going to go ahead and do it.
I think the scary part about it is many times what the inner critic catastrophizes over could be possibly true. It's just the chances are so low
Right.
that it's very unlikely. Could
Right,
happen. It could happen for sure, but so unlikely.
Right. Like if I set a boundary with my boss asks me to do something and I am overspent, like my plate is so full, it's overflowing. If I say no, the worst thing, let's say I get fired and then I never find a job again, and then I'm homeless and I live in a cardboard box and I beg for food on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Like you took it all the way. Take it all the way. What's the worst? I can't feed my family and we're all starving and all the shelters are full. And now, is that true? Like, was that reality?
Eventually.
And then you can work yourself to, well, what's the best thing that can happen?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right. I'm ready for this, Michelle.
So when we talk about all these things, it can feel overwhelming. It can actually swing us into a loop of wherever our comfort zone is within all these things. What these things are is a way to avoid meeting who you really are. It is a form of avoidance. It's keeping the walls up, keeping the wounds tucked away, and not looking at the light that is you. That sounds so blah, but like the real you, your strengths and the reason you're here from shining out into the world. We call it protection, but it's actually avoidance. And so consider that just the awareness of where you land in these is information that can help you make a decision to maybe just start crumbling some of the walls and some of the ways. And before you make that decision, gather your resources and most importantly, people, whether that be professional help in the mental health or medical industry, or whether that be trusted friends, or whether that be a brand new community, or whether it be a coach or anything else. But find your support and then decide, because you're the only one who can decide to get out of this and to meet you. We tuck ourselves away so deeply. And I think all of these things, it's like, I say it's avoidance, and that might sound harsh, but it is. It's like, you got to own your life. You have to own who you really are and be willing to be vulnerable enough to find it and reveal it and show up in that way consistently. You're building a muscle. And so these are muscles that are strong. We build them without thought. They're mindless, they're habits. Find ways to create routines and rituals and sacred practices, or whatever your word is, but like healthy habits. I don't think the word habit builds positivity or like a positive mindset. But I think knowing that I'm making a mindful decision and I'm making a choice in how I show up, and it's going to be from the capital M me that serves the capital W we, because I think that's what it's about. And so just decide. And the compassion piece is so huge. Like everything you both said is so perfectly beautiful. In like when we do this work, there's a lot of layers that we have to keep in mind. I talk about layers a lot lately. I don't know, but it's all complicated, but it doesn't have to feel that way. We can simplify it one layer at a time. Get to compassion first. Start there. Eventually you will decide to meet yourself. And it's a fucking beautiful thing. We're all beautiful. Who we really are is beautiful. I believe that through and through. So find that part of you and fucking love it. And then let other people love it. Fuck, it's so cool. So good.
All right.
There's that mic drop.
We were talking about that earlier. Michelle's, I'm having problems with my mic. Well, so that's because you get all those mic drops all the time. And there it was. Boom. All right. So I have a visualization slash exercise that we could do. And normally up to this point, I will have worked with somebody to give this voice an actual physical body that they can visualize and see. That voice almost always comes up in the embodiment of a family member. Like for me, my grandfather will show up in my head, and then pre-teenage, probably 8, he started calling me a stupid motherfucker and a goddamn little prick. And I remember my dad's voice coming later, boy, get up, get to work, don't be lazy. Right? It was never in a really nasty, negative, put me down kind of way, but it was the undercurrent was if you're not productive, then you're not useful, then you're less than, right? So this voice almost always has a body. It could be a version of yourself. It could be a relative, a parent, a grandparent. It could be a teacher. It could be a spiritual teacher, priest, preacher, whatever. So give that voice, whatever your inner critic's voice sounds like to you, give it that body and really make it real. And this exercise is going to go in a slightly different way than what I've typically seen amongst the self-improvement world. What I typically see is, I remember there's a guy on stage talking about how his inner bully had to walk the plank in a visualization, and he made him walk the plank, and he made him jump the plank, and he drowned his inner bully. But, oh, I know he's going to be back because my inner bully is strong. He's a really good swimmer, and he'll be back. But you know what? I'll fight him again. And the question that went through my head is, if you're always at war with yourself, if you're fighting yourself, who wins? So we're going to take this a slightly different way. Visualization, you're welcome to close your eyes, or if you're like me, you can roll your eyes, whatever you want to do, and start to really truly envision this inner critic that you have. Make that voice real. Imagine what they're wearing. Imagine their skin color, their hair color. What's the expression on their face? What do you see around you? What are you smelling? Continue to allow this vision to be even more real. Listen to what this inner critic has to say. And as soon as they are finished, tell them thank you. I appreciate you for trying to protect me for all these years, for trying to keep me safe. There may be some fight in you right now. There may be some rejection. Like you probably have maybe some animosity or some anger or sadness or whatever it is, it gets to be here. And it's okay. Allow it to exist. And let's try it again. Thank you for trying to protect me. Thank you for trying to keep me safe all this time. I am now an adult who is responsible for my own world. And from here on out, you are welcome to say all you have to say, but at the end of the day, I make the decisions. I decide how to act. And y'all are welcome to come out of this whenever you're ready. Stay in as long as you need to. And notice what shifted in you. Y'all willing to share?
I can share vaguely.
Okay.
It was interesting. It kept shifting. The voice was, it was like I was seeing all the different voices, which was kind of amazing. And eventually it turned into almost like a cartoon creature, which was fascinating and kind of cool. But then when I love that you did the thank and appreciate, because that just brought me to a very specific thing that was very, I don't know, it felt really good. It was really necessary, and I didn't necessarily know that. And 5 days ago, that meditation would have been very different for me because I've been kind of in some stuff, doing some deep work. And so I found it fascinating to recognize that like 5 days ago, I don't know what that would have looked like. And today was the perfect day for me to receive that. So thank you for that. That was really cool.
Well, I think on that note, what was neat for me is I have done this exercise before, and this time the critic did show up manifest as a different avatar, person, whatever. So that is interesting that you can do this exercise more than once and still find it takes you in a different place. So thank you.
I love what Tanya just pointed out. I have done the exercise of thinking because all of those saboteurs, all of those critics, they want to keep us safe. So thanking them rather than fighting them is energy better spent. And this is an exercise that is worth repeating and is very helpful to continue repeating because those critics that live inside of our heads in our inner worlds, they have roles, recurring roles throughout our whole lives. So it isn't, a one-time appearance. So that it's continued work. Work on ourselves is continued work. It never ends as long as we're alive. So continuing, going back to this exercise, I felt a shift in me, even though I've done this, I've done this exercise for years. I've done this and I felt a shift now again. I felt peace. I felt more peaceful, and it was a different visual.
Amazing how people seeking inner peace will then try to fight themselves.
Yeah, we can hate ourselves through it or we can love ourselves through it. And we so often pick hate. Why? Why do we do that?
Yeah.
Because it's easier.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what we're used to. It's familiar.
It's a lot harder to love through things than it is to be angry.
Well, because to love is to also understand.
I love that point. That's a great point.
Well, I think
That's a great point.
I think when you love through something hard, then pain is going to accompany it.
But it's pain with purpose.
Wait, what are we talking about again? Do we shift subjects?
Oh, it's still, I think it's still on topic. It's pain with purpose where we're willing to endure discomfort because we know that the goal to understand, to love, for that compassion to be there, there's going to be discomfort, but it will feel worthwhile because we expect it and it will feel worthwhile.
Exactly.
I thought we went back to talking about tops and bottoms again.
Oh.
All right, Dan. Whoa, I just noticed your cup there, Alina. That's what did he call that?
I noticed it right away this morning. Oxymoron.
That's the word I was looking for, an oxymoron.
Uh-huh.
That's exactly the word I was
drink
looking
coffee?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100% that's an oxymoron.
It can be. Definitely can be.
Unless you're going into caffeine withdrawals, then I guess to get calm you need to soothe that addiction.
Well, it's not to get calm. See, it says just keep on keeping on and have some coffee. Depends on how you view it. I could see how you see it as an
What do you mean?
oxymoron.
A nervous system stimulant will never allow you to keep calm. That's the oxymoron. Hey, I'm going to put a stimulant in my body and keep calm. Hey, I think I need to get calm. Let me go grab some amphetamines.
Whoa. What the Don? That was just coffee.
A central nervous system stimulant. Literally the class of drug that it fits in is central nervous system stimulant. Keep calm and drink coffee is an oxymoron.
Hey, you know what else is a stimulant? Alina's cup.
Oh,
cheers.
Happy New Year's Eve, guys, girls, people.
Happy New Year's
Eve. Happy New Year's Eve.
Happy New Year's Eve.
So this goes out. This is our first podcast of 2025.
Mm-mm.
No,
it's going to be habit
second.
loops is going to be the first one.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yep. All right, Dan.
All righty.
I'm gonna hit the button.
Stuff.
Thank you for listening to That's a Great Point with Alina Doran, Michelle Albers, and Lee Smart. To find out more about how we can serve you, check out our links in the show description. Thanks for playing along.